This is the story of how one teller's discrimination led to her downfall and taught an entire community about the true face of success. The crisp autumn morning was just beginning to warm the windows of First Capital Bank in Boston's financial district. Golden leaves danced across the granite steps as Dr. James Richardson pulled into his usual parking spot in his understated Volvo sedan. At 62, his face carried the gentle lines of a man who'd spent decades making life-or-death decisions in operating rooms. His salt-and-pepper hair was immaculately trimmed, and his tailored charcoal suit spoke of subtle refinement, though the teller would later claim he looked suspicious. That morning, Dr. Richardson had performed a successful emergency heart transplant, saving the life of a young mother. Now, as he prepared for another important task, the leather wallet in his pocket contained bank cards worth more access than most people see in their careers. His mind was on the inner-city youth center he was planning to fund, a dream 20 years in the making. Inside his car, he took a moment to call his wife, Marie. "The surgery went well, dear," he said softly. "Now heading to the bank for the property purchase. Should be home in time for dinner with the grandkids." Behind the bank's heavy oak doors, Jennifer Morris was already at her station, straightening her nameplate for the third time that morning. The golden letters caught the light. Senior teller. 1 month into her promotion at First Capital's downtown branch, she was eager to prove herself worthy of the role. At 29, she'd climbed the ranks quickly, though some whispered it had more to do with her friendship with the previous manager than her qualifications. Jennifer adjusted her blonde hair and designer blouse, reminding herself that vigilance was everything in banking. She'd recently completed a fraud detection course and was determined to show her newfound expertise. If only she knew how that misguided zeal would be her undoing. The lobby was starting to fill with the morning rush, investment bankers in pressed suits, young professionals clutching coffee cups, and retirees there for their routine transactions. The marble floors echoed with purposeful footsteps and hushed conversations about market trends and interest rates. Dr. Richardson entered quietly, his commanding presence drawing immediate attention. Several regular customers nodded in recognition. He'd saved their loved ones over his 30-year career at Mass General. A young nurse from his hospital smiled warmly, but he didn't notice her. His mind was on the youth center plans tucked into his briefcase. "Good morning," he said politely, approaching Jennifer's window. His voice carried the warm authority of someone used to calming anxious patients. "I'd like to make a withdrawal from my account." Jennifer's carefully penciled eyebrows drew together as she looked him up and down. Her gaze lingered disapprovingly on his face, ignoring his professional attire and dignified bearing. "Do you have your account information and ID?" she asked, her tone already tinged with suspicion and barely concealed disdain. Dr. Richardson produced his platinum debit card and driver's license, placing them carefully on the counter. The card's metallic surface caught the morning light. "I'd like to withdraw $50,000 for a real estate transaction," he stated calmly. "I believe my appointment was confirmed yesterday." Jennifer picked up his ID with 2 fingers as if it might be contaminated. Her eyes narrowed as she examined it, then darted to her computer screen. The balance displayed would have made her gasp if she believed it was real. "This can't be your account," she declared loudly enough for nearby customers to hear. "This is a platinum account with significant holdings. How did you get this card?" The lobby grew quiet, the kind of quiet that falls before a storm. Other tellers stopped their transactions, watching uncomfortably. A few customers began recording discreetly with their phones, sensing the weight of the moment. Dr. Richardson maintained his composure, though a flicker of weary recognition crossed his face. He'd been here before, too many times before. Every achievement in his life, from his Harvard Medical School admission to his position as chief of cardiac surgery, had been met with similar doubts from people like Jennifer. "The account is mine," he stated calmly, his voice carrying decades of earned authority. "I'm Dr. James Richardson, chief of cardiac surgery at Massachusetts General Hospital. You can verify my identity and account status. I also believe you'll find a note about today's withdrawal in the system." Jennifer's face flushed red. She stood up straighter, raising her voice even more. "Listen here," she snapped. "I don't know what kind of scam you're trying to pull, but we don't tolerate fraud. These cards are exclusively for our highest-tier clients. She emphasized highest tier while looking pointedly at his skin color. I'm calling security right now. That won't be necessary, Jennifer. A sharp voice cut through the tension like a scalpel through tissue. Sarah Chen, the bank's regional manager, emerged from her office, her face a mask of controlled anger. She'd been watching the entire exchange on the security feed, her horror growing with each passing moment. Dr. Richardson, she said warmly, hurrying across the lobby. I apologize profusely for this inexcusable treatment. I just saw your name on the day's appointment list for large withdrawals. I should have been notified immediately of your arrival. Jennifer's face went from red to pale as Sarah continued, addressing the now silent lobby. Everyone, Dr. James Richardson is not only one of our most valued clients but also one of Boston's most renowned cardiac surgeons. He's saved countless lives, including my father's last year. His work in pediatric heart surgery is revolutionary, and his research has changed how we treat congenital heart defects. But he... Jennifer stammered, her worldview crumbling around her. But what exactly? Sarah's voice could have frozen fire. Doesn't look like what you think a doctor should look like? Doesn't match your prejudiced image of success? Please, Jennifer, enlighten us all about exactly what you think a distinguished surgeon should look like. I was just trying to protect the bank from fraud, Jennifer protested weakly, tears forming in her eyes. The training said to be vigilant? No, Sarah cut her off, her voice sharp with authority. The training said to verify unusual transactions. It did not say to humiliate customers based on their race. Dr. Richardson has been a valued client for 20 years. His appointment for this withdrawal was in the system. You didn't even bother to check because you'd already made assumptions. You're terminated, effective immediately. We have zero tolerance for discrimination. As security arrived, this time to escort Jennifer out, Dr. Richardson called after her. Miss Morris. She turned, tears now streaming down her face. I hope this moment teaches you something, he said quietly, his voice carrying the same gentleness he used with scared patients. In my operating room, I've held the hearts of people of every color, every background, every belief. And do you know what I've learned? They all beat the same way. The only real difference is in how we choose to see each other. The incident went viral within hours. Security footage showing Jennifer's blatant discrimination and Dr. Richardson's dignified response spread across social media platforms. But what touched people most wasn't the injustice, it was his grace in handling it. The story caught fire in medical communities nationwide. Hundreds of Black medical students and doctors shared their own experiences with prejudice. Major hospitals began reviewing their diversity policies. The American Medical Association invited Dr. Richardson to speak about breaking barriers in medicine. A month later, Dr. Richardson stood in that same bank lobby, but under very different circumstances. He was there to announce the establishment of the Richardson Future Healers Fund, a $5 million scholarship program for minority medical students, backed by the very withdrawal Jennifer had tried to deny him. The first scholarship ceremony was held right there in the bank branch. Among the attendees was Jennifer Morris, now enrolled in diversity and inclusion training courses. The experience had shaken her to her core, forcing her to confront her own biases. She sat quietly in the back, listening as Dr. Richardson addressed the crowd. When I was a young man dreaming of becoming a doctor, he began, many people told me it was impossible. They had decided what I could and couldn't be before they ever knew me. But here's what I learned. Excellence has no color. Integrity has no race. The only heart condition we need to fear is a heart closed to human dignity. He paused, looking around the packed lobby. Today, we're not just giving scholarships. We're giving permission to dream. We're telling every young person who's ever been judged by the color of their skin instead of the content of their character. Your dreams are valid. Your ambitions are worthy. Your future is bright. The first scholarship recipient was a young woman from Roxbury, whose single mother worked 3 jobs to support her pre-med studies. As she accepted the award, her hands shaking, Dr. Richardson smiled. Remember, he told her, every time someone tells you what you can't do, let it fuel what you will do. The story didn't end there. First Capital Bank instituted mandatory monthly diversity training for all employees. They revised their hiring practices and created a diversity and inclusion officer position. Other banks in Boston followed suit, leading to broader changes across the financial sector. Jennifer Morris eventually wrote a public apology, acknowledging her biases and describing her journey to overcome them. She now volunteers at inner-city schools, sharing her story as a cautionary tale about the cost of prejudice and the importance of seeing beyond appearances. As for Dr. Richardson, he continued saving lives in the operating room and changing lives through his foundation. The youth center he planned to fund opened 6 months later, offering after-school STEM programs and medical career guidance to underserved communities. And slowly, hearts began to open, one lesson at a time, one story at a time, one change at a time. Because sometimes the most important surgery isn't performed in an operating room, but in the human heart, where prejudice is excised and replaced with understanding. As Dr. Richardson often says now in his lectures to medical students, in surgery, we don't see color, we see human beings in need of help. It's time the rest of the world learned to do the same. This story touched your heart for a reason. Because deep down, we all know that change isn't just possible, it's necessary. And these stories of triumph over prejudice, of dignity over discrimination, of humanity over hatred, they're happening every day, in every city, in every walk of life. But they can only make a difference if they're shared, if they're heard, if they're felt. That's why I need your help to spread these messages of hope and change. Hit that subscribe button right now, not just for more stories, but for more moments that will change the way you see the world. Ring that notification bell because every story you miss is a lesson left unlearned. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Maybe it's that friend who doesn't see color. Maybe it's that relative who makes uncomfortable comments at family dinners. Or maybe it's someone who needs to be reminded that their dreams are valid, regardless of what others might think. Drop a comment below sharing your own story of facing prejudice, or better yet, tell us about a moment when you recognized and changed your own biases. Let's build a community of real talk, real change, and real growth. Remember, change doesn't just happen in grand gestures. It happens in small moments, in quiet realizations, in stories shared and lessons learned. And it happens right here, every week, with stories that matter. See you in the next video, where we'll continue to open minds, change hearts, and build a world where dignity knows no color. Until then, keep rising, keep shining, and most importantly, keep sharing these stories that need to be told. Because together, we're not just watching content, we're changing the world one story at a time.